Good morning, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Mesa City Council study session for April the 11th. Councilmember Luna is absent and excused from this meeting. The first item on our agenda is to review the agenda for the April 15th regular council meeting. So council, if you'd please look at that. It's a rather thick document this week because there's a lot of grants that are being processed through. So it's not quite as onerous as it might look, but currently there's nothing off the consent agenda. Let's see if that stays the case. First several items are liquor license applications, followed by purchase contracts. Mr. Thompson.
I'd like to pull item 4T off of the consent agenda.
Okay, I think there might be some breaking news there. It's no longer off. It's off.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, any other items you know that you have questions on? Like I say, going through it blow by blow would be difficult. A lot of this is good news. Under agenda item 5, there are multiple funding pass-throughs. As we know, we're fortunate to live next to some great Indian communities that are generous with their gaming proceeds, and a lot of those grants are being reflected under agenda item 5, a lot of pass-throughs going on to nonprofits in the community. So it's probably worth noting and thanking our Indian community neighbors for their help with some of the social service agencies in town. Mr. Thompson.
Mayor, I'm glad to see item 5AB through AF, how we're modifying our fees and updating our fees. And this could be either for John or for Chris, but we looked at updating the off-duty for PD on their fees and charges.
Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, yes, we have looked at that. Actually, that'll be one of the first things that we bring to public safety when we have our next public safety meeting.
Thank you. Council, any other questions regarding the agenda for Monday? If not, I know we've got a lot to talk about today as well. The first item on our agenda now is to hear a presentation and provide direction on the police department budget, which, as we all know, is a big part of the City of Mesa budget. We've got, oh, thanks. Thank you. Welcome, Chief. Thank you very much. No, my password was up today, so we'll see if I can get it updated.
We ready?
Welcome, yes.
Mr. Mayor, Council, and City staff, good morning, and welcome to the 2019-2020 Mesa Police Department Annual Budget Presentation. With me this morning is our Finance Manager, Ms. Krista York, Assistant Chief Sherry Burlingame, Chief Ken Cost, and Chief Dan Butler. The Mesa Police Department and the City of Mesa had a terrific year. We closed 2018 as one of the safest large cities in America. It is not just a number. Today, we enjoy crime and victimization rates that rival smaller communities. We have fewer victims today than we did 10 years ago. We owe this to the makeup of our city and the relentless crime-fighting programs at the Mesa PD. Each day, our police officers carry out their duties to protect and serve the residents of Mesa with the highest level of professionalism and integrity, and we do it with your support. The City of Mesa and the Mesa Police Department are a great place to be. Our proposal today is built on years of experience from everyone at the table, including the conversations we had with our personnel, the community, and you. And we used years of population data to merge the city's strategic priorities with our community and department needs. So let's get started.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city staff. I wanted to talk more about how Mesa is one of the safest large cities in America. Through FBI numbers, they track crime stats and crime rate by per 1,000 number. To give you a perspective on that, right now we're at an all-time low at 24.3 crimes per 1,000. The FBI tracks those crimes and Part 1 crimes by the type of crime they are. So part one crime would be homicide, robbery, aggravated assault, rape. In the property crime section, it would be residential burglary, commercial burglary, theft from vehicle, auto theft, and theft, just to name a few. And our crime fighting model and our community engagement are a big part of that. And our staffing model is built around that. And we've been data-driven policing since 2006, and the numbers from 2006 to decline to where they are now are staggering. Before 2006, we were at 57 crimes per 1,000. And our highest ratio in the city of Mesa was at 100 at one point per 1,000 for our crime rate. And we're now down at 24.3. We're doing very well, both locally and nationally. If you go to the next slide, you can see where we rank amongst cities our same size throughout the country. And we're highlighted there in red, and as you see, our crime rate is only second to Virginia Beach, Virginia, and rivals all the other cities listed: Arlington, Texas, Colorado Springs, Atlanta, Minneapolis, Tulsa, and so on. So we're doing very, very well in that regard, but our staffing model is built around our crime fighting and community engagement.
Mr. Mayor, council, and staff, our top challenge is our department staffing. Our plan today will outline a portion of the needs for the department. I emphasize what we are asking for in sworn and professional staff keeps us at the level we are today. Using reliable data from our 911 call history and Mesa's population, we are forecasting our needs in order to keep up with the service demands. Our community is growing, and we need to ensure that we are keeping up with the demand for services. The influx of people into any given area will trigger the need for more services. Our community engagement activities are nonstop. In the past year, our crime prevention officers organized and coordinated over 400 events with great success. And for the first time in our history, this weekend, as a matter of fact, we will take the Citizens Police Academy out into the city and into the neighborhoods with a focus on humanizing the work of our officers and educating the public about what we do. Our goal is to build ambassadors for our department and our officers in the neighborhoods that we patrol. Our overall vision is to leverage new technology. Our strategic goal is to introduce technology that is properly integrated into our system and fits our needs. Mr. Patrick Phelps, our IT manager, was previously a police officer, and he is keen to our vision in achieving the right balance in the intersection of technology and human ability. We want our systems and our people to work together. As you'll see in the next few slides, one of the factors that affects our staffing analysis is population, the mix of residential and business properties, along with the important element of maturing communities. Maturing communities drive the need for services. Kids grow up, they start to drive, and they get themselves into situations that young people do. At the same time, parents and grandparents are in the aging process, and life is taking its course. What we'll see today is with the number of calls, what we see today with the number of calls for service on the west side of Mesa versus a growing Mesa community in the east side of the city.
So, Mayor, Council, City staff, the next slide you'll see is a visual of building permits over the past 14 years for single-family and multifamily residential communities. And it emphasizes the massive growth that I think we all understand that's going on in the southeast portion of our city and the northeast portion of our city. So as we talk about our staffing model and our staffing concerns moving forward, we talk about population as it relates to dispatch calls for service. The next slide will show a progression of population compared to our dispatch calls for service. It's important to note that this visual is just our dispatched only calls for service. We have other calls for service that we go on that are self-initiated. So it's when officers are seeing crimes in progress or being proactive or conducting a community engagement opportunity. Over the past 4 years, we've seen a 14,000 call increase that coincides with a population boost of 27,000 residents in the city of Mesa. Roughly, we are equal to about a 2.2% increase in our calls for service along with the population. So there is a correlation there in regard to the population and dispatch calls for service. As we go into the next slide, you'll see that these are all 4 of our patrol divisions that cover all 6 council districts. And it gives you an idea over the past 4 years of where we're at as far as calls for service. Our Central and our Fiesta divisions are on our west side. You'll see that Central's calls for service are going up over the past few years. Fiesta is staying fairly steady, if not declining slightly. Red Mountain's been fairly steady as well. And then you see over at Superstition, it's starting to climb as well. And that coincides with the heat map that we showed you earlier, referenced the growth in our community.
Excuse me, Mr. Thompson.
Anytime you show super, I'm going to ask the question. So if you're seeing all of a sudden a decrease in calls for service in Fiesta and Red Mountain, or you're seeing them stay fairly steady, why aren't we shifting bodies out to super to help cover the need for officers in that area?
Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, through our process, not only yearly, but every 28 days, we look through our CompStat model of where our calls for service are, what types of calls, everything from violent to property to the time our officers are spending on calls. And each year we make adjustments through our personnel. And it might not be, a large amount of officers, but it could be a few officers taken from Red Mountain to move over to Superstition, or from Fiesta to move over to Central, and start reallocating some of our resources based on that call load. So currently, for example, we do our shift bid and our shift change coming up in June, and then in August. We are going through our analytics and our data right now to kind of determine not only what the beat sizes are, and I'll talk about beats in just a little bit, but where our allocated resources go. So we're constantly analyzing that, and it's just a matter of having enough staffing to put in those areas to address that. And I think the next slide will kind of explain a little bit of what I'm talking about. This slide is a heat map, and this is, again, dispatch calls for service. So obviously the red and the orange and the yellow are the density of calls on what's happening on the map. And this is dispatch only, but it also talks a little bit about workload. It's a little bit deceiving because, as you see, if you look up at beat 52, which is in the north center, and then beat 74 in the northeast corner, those beats are very, very large. Beat 74, for example, would have 6,200 calls for service, but that beat is 16.4 square miles. That's bigger than Fiesta and Central's division all by itself. However, when you look at growth and density, and you look at population density, and you go over to beat 14, that's 0.72 square miles. That's in our Longmore corridor in the Fiesta division in that district, where it's multi-housing, very dense population. They have almost 5,000 calls just by itself in that small area. So when we determine our beats, that's where you kind of see the differences in beat sizes, and that's what we analyze on a consistent basis. As we go into the next slide, this is a cleaner version, and it kind of shows you the square mileage of our divisions as they are right now as we talk about staffing moving forward. If you look over at Superstition, it's almost 71 square miles. You could fit the town of Gilbert and a couple other small towns within the Superstition division alone. Red Mountain, almost 40 square miles, and then you see what I was determining before as far as 12.3 for Central and 13.8 for Fiesta. So as we build our staffing model moving forward to address the growth and the density happening out east, we also are constantly balancing those calls for service with all of our council districts to make sure it's evenly distributed. As you go to the next one with the radiant lines, this is purely conceptual. So as we build toward the 5th district, that we're thankful for the voters and we're thankful for the support to have a 5th district being built in the northeast portion of Mesa, we are going to be able to reallocate and reboundary our divisions to better serve and balance all 6 districts. And as you see, Fiesta would lose a beat, maybe 2 beats, and become smaller, which is going to increase the efficiency and productivity within that division. Central would stay somewhat the same, but maybe shrink just a little bit based on our analytics. And then Red Mountain has shrunk considerably in this concept. And then you see that Superstition is now truly a southeast patrol division, serving the citizens of Mesa in that portion. And then you see the new substation would be a true northeast substation serving the citizens in that area as well.
Mr. Mayor, council, and staff, in the next two slides, I will highlight the new positions we acquired through last year's mid-year adjustments, where we picked up 4 new police officers, 10 part-time dispatchers, a risk management analyst, and a media relations specialist. And in fiscal 1920, we will acquire 2 crime scene supervisors, a training coordinator, and an information technology analyst for a total of 15 new positions from the general budget. As Chief Cost noted earlier, through the voter-approved public safety sales tax revenue, we will hire a total of 17 new officers in fiscal year 1920. 12 officers will go to patrol, and 5 will go to specialty units. This is where we begin to build the much-needed cadre of detectives into support units, including 8 professional staff positions listed on the right column. A police service officer who takes countless calls instead of a patrol officer, a cold case investigator instead of a police detective, an aviation pilot instead of a police officer, a policy and procedure analyst, a CompStat analyst that will help enhance our crime-fighting programs, and our planning unit, which will help us chart our new path forward. Our patrol officers are the face of our police department, and rightly so. Patrol officers are by and large who the public has contact with. However, there are many functions that occur behind the scenes that are necessary to keep our crime rates low and ensure our community is safe. There are detectives and professional staff that either provide direct patrol support or are responsible for investigations in complex cases such as persons crimes, homicides, kidnappings, narcotics, and document crimes, just to name a few. It is vitally important that we maintain a strong staffing level in these areas to ensure timely victim follow-up and arrest of the suspects. Shortages lead to higher caseloads and lengthier investigations, meaning that there are delays in providing service to the victims, as well as solving cases and making arrests. What we are doing here today is striving for a hybrid of sworn and professional staff. Our professional staff bring a high level of expertise and continuity, which greatly enhances productivity and effectiveness. This plan maintains our sworn and professional staff balance at 62% sworn and 38% non-sworn. This 4-year plan will raise our staffing level from 761 sworn to 820, and our professional staff from 462 to 495, for a total of 1,315 in 4 years.
Excuse me, Chief. Mr. Thompson has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, before we get too far, so how many sworn and non-sworn are you asking, or let me rephrase, how many sworn officers are you asking for in this budget? 12?
59.
Oh, you're asking for 59? How many of those are we bringing on to put into the new substation in District 5?
Actually, Chief Cost has that number. It is not all 59, it is a combination.
If the question is, how many sworn positions we're adding in next year's budget, the answer is?
17.
How many sworn positions did you add in 2017?
In 2017?
17, 18.
That year, we went from a total of 772 to 752.
So decreased?
Yes.
How many did you add in the 16, 17 year? So you added 13, and then the following year we didn't add really any, and now we're adding another 17. But our population has increased probably, I don't know, quite a bit over the last 3 to 4 years. And so, part of me says that, are we hiring the amount of officers that we need to safely, or to keep our community safe and to be efficient and effective? I know our overtime hours are up. And then when you start taking into account, I'm sure you guys take into account vacations and things like that, but What about injuries to our officers, whether it's mental or physical health issues, or if somebody calls in sick? Are we taking that into account? Are we adding officers knowing that we're truly only going to have a certain amount at any one time? I mean, we just lost 2 officers to deployment in the Guard. So do we take all of that into account on our staffing models, or do we just have a number out there and we try to meet that number?
Let me touch on a portion of that, and then Chief Koss is going to touch on the staffing, because you're talking mostly relative to the issues in patrol. So the city of Mesa happens to be one of the very few cities around the country that allows us to forecast ahead of time how many vacancies we're expected to have. So with the program that we have, we are continually examining and looking at what the vacancy rate looks like. We kind of know how many we lose month to month, and so we can forecast ahead of time with our recruiting and our hiring to make sure that that pipeline is full in anticipation of the vacancies that we know are coming in order to staff those academies appropriately. And I agree, it seems as though we've had some months where we have more folks that are deciding to retire than we forecasted, but those adjustments are made on the fly. The communication between the police department and the finance office is strong, and so we make those adjustments. One of the things that Chief Butler is going to work on is the addition of a 3rd academy throughout the year instead of 2 academies. Regardless, that ability for us to forecast and hire people knowing that vacancies are coming is extremely helpful, and not something that happens in other cities. Now, with respect to the issues you talked about with military leave, sick, and things of those nature, Chief Koss has some of that information.
Yeah. Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, right now we are seeing an increase in industrial injuries, both physically, mentally, and otherwise, and also our military deployments has skyrocketed from year to year. So that certainly has an impact on patrol staffing. That leaves a vacancy, or it leaves a hole within a squad, and the squads aren't very big to begin with, so that definitely has an effect. As Chief Batista was speaking of, our academies and our academies are put in, are bodies that we're taking care of for attrition. And we've had a really good, academy-sized classes go through. We have officers in training right now that are about ready to graduate. We have 30 plus in the academy right now. Our next academy is going to be healthy, and as those academies come out, those bodies and the additional bodies that we're talking about today will help mitigate some of those issues, because they're significant. That's what your patrol sergeants and patrol officers deal with on a daily basis, is coming in and realizing that we don't have deployable officers to deploy, and that's where overtime fills in a little bit our strategy in mitigating, using other units to help out to try to offset that. But it definitely is something that we're aware of, that we're working on, and we'll come back with more plans to try to mitigate that issue moving forward.
I guess my concern is, it seems like we're really just being the little Dutch kid on the dam, right? We're plugging holes. We're not solving the problem. If our overtime hours are increasing, our officers' mental health, our officers having mental health issues or what have you, or being stressed or what have you because of the hours worked and so forth, then why aren't we solving the problem instead of just plugging the holes? I mean, obviously we're getting more calls for service in certain areas of town. Our city's growing. We're the 35th largest city in the U.S. now, but we're still operating as though we're the 40th largest city. It seems like with our population growth, we're going to have more calls for service. So why aren't we increasing or ramping up our number of officers, either patrol? I mean, even when you talk about Part 1 crimes, when you get into property damage or burglaries and stuff like that, that takes a lot of time for detectives to be to do the necessary engagement to find the suspects and make the arrests. Do we have enough detectives that can be out there fighting the good fight on behalf of our citizens? I don't know what that answer is, but to only ask for 16 and then drop and then ask for 17, I mean, to me, it seems like we're being reactive instead of being proactive into keeping our community safe.
Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and Mr. Thompson, if you're asking me whether we need more officers, we need more detectives, I would tell you that of course we do. and I'll take as many.
How many do you need?
I'll take as many as.
How many do you want?
I'll take as many as you will afford for us to have, without a doubt. You could give us 50 officers today, and we would immediately find something for them to do. So with your question about whether or not we have enough detectives, no, we don't have enough detectives. But this is the plan that we have at the moment, and I'm willing to take whatever you can offer.
And so that's what I want to know is how many officers do you need to do your job to make sure that your people are doing their job efficiently, effectively, and safely? Is it 15 or is it 60 or is it 100?
It's really as many as you can give us because we have an infinite need.
Because our job as council is, we answer to the citizens of Mesa. The city manager answers to council. And we need to make sure that our citizens are feeling safe and that we have the officers out there that can do the job. And they deserve to have a life as well, and not be, working for the city, 12-hour days or 10-hour days or what have you, 5 days or 6 days a week, and sometimes even on their day off because you have call-outs for sick and you have military deployments and stuff like that. And so it just seems like we need to be ramped up better. I think it's our job as council to ensure that you have the men and women that you need to do the job. As far as this slide, I'm glad we're adding an officer to Phoenix Mesa Gateway. My question is, how many officers are there currently, and how much does the Board Authority or the airport pay the city of Mesa for those officers?
Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, currently we have 14 officers and 2 sergeants and a lieutenant that oversees that area that's assigned over to the Superstition substation. That number will increase because the amount of airlines that increased, the amount of flights, and the amount of activity in and around the airport. As you know, the commercial buildup in and around the airport is significant. We have Skybridge coming up very soon, and so we're starting to ramp up based on those numbers and their calls for service to add additional officers out there. As far as the financial agreement, I know we're in talks right now. We're meeting as early as next week to discuss the newest agreement. So I think it's premature to talk about where we're at on that because
how much are they paying us right now for the officers that we have out there?
$350,000.
Does that cover 14 officers or 9 officers?
No.
No.
So how many officers does that cover currently?
3 to 4. It's some of his vehicles, some of his officers. I think you're in that 3 to 4 range.
So
You'd have to come back with the exact.
So are any other cities?
It's 4.2, whatever
So are any other
0.2 officer is.
Are any other cities or any other entities pitching in to help offset our costs? Or are we just kind of, the citizens are paying for officers to be, to sit at the airport and protect the airport, and we're eating the cost of it when the airport really should be paying for those officers and the vehicles and whatever else they should have to keep the airport safe?
Not at this time.
And why not?
Because that's not how it works.
Why does it not work that way?
Because the other cities contribute to the airport. But they don't contribute to the police department, they contribute to the airport.
So how come the airport's not contributing then to the police department to pay for the officers and the vehicles that are out there?
We can ask the same question on fire. But we don't fully recover all the cost that's out there.
Please
So
proceed.
let me clarify some things because when a question is asked and we give the answer, it probably doesn't give the whole picture. So when we talk about how many officers, sworn officers, were hired over the last few years, we need to come back to council because when you say that one year we said there was none, well, it's because council directed us to civilianize, and we are still having that conversation today. So in that 1 year, we civilianized 15 sworn positions. So we put 15 sworn positions back out on the streets by replacing them with 15 civilian positions. And we're going forward, we're also, as you noticed, and the chief was talking about this, some of these positions, I know the professional staff, in the past, the work that they are doing now was handled by a sworn position. So just separating sworn from professional staff probably isn't, we need to understand that a lot of these positions or some of these positions in the professional staff are doing the work that once was done by sworn. So we have, you know, one year, I think it was 17, 18 or whatever the year was, we civilianized 15 positions that had previously someone with a sworn had been sitting in that seat. And so it was a significant improvement for the police department who got 15 positions back in on the street, and we replaced them with 15 sworn positions. So, but we can get you that whole history, because it's both a combination of hiring new sworn as well as how many did we civilianize in that same year. And just a reminder, in this year, because of the public safety sales tax, we're able to add in this next coming year 25 positions, and that's on top, and then in addition to that, there's another 4 positions that's coming out of the general government. So you're at 29, plus mid-year last year, we added another 4 positions mid-year for the light rail. So you know, you're already over 30 positions that we've hired in the last, will have hired in the last 18 months, which is significantly higher. It's twice as much as we've done in any one year prior to this.
But Chris, that sales tax, the officers that we're hiring, those officers are going to go to the, eventually going to end up at the new station.
I think they're going to go, I don't know if they're going to the new station.
They're going to go throughout the city, but at some point in time, there's going to be a number of officers that are going to be ramped up to go to the new station in District 5. And so you're going to fill that station up. And how many officers do you typically have at a station on average?
Well, it depends. I'm sorry, Mayor, Councilmember Thompson. It depends on the call load and all the analytics that we're doing, and we're currently on a feverish pace to do the analytics for that 5th substation. So we'll come back with a number of what that substation would look like. Conceptually, we have an idea. To answer your question, for example, Superstition has 76 officers. Central has 75. That's based on a lot of analytics and on how we do that. Red Mountain has 80, and Fiesta has 95. But again, if we go back to that heat map, it's all based on the analytics and the data that we pull to get the resources in that area. So as we study that northeast portion of the city, and not just the northeast, the whole city, grid by grid to redistrict, that's the way we do it. And grid by grid is roughly about 1/4 of a mile. And everything from the calls to service to the type of businesses to whether they're schools, types of companies that might be in the area, the amount of people that are employed in that area, all factor in to how we determine that. So we'll come back to council with how that 5th substation looks like down the road, because it's premature to talk about at this point without having all the data to support it. It would just be speculation at this point.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chiefs. I think in listening to Councilmember Thompson's discussion here, first of all, I think it begins with recruitment, having that pipeline of recruiting personnel, and having 2 academies a year is based on all the other collateral damage that happens, whether it's drop, whether it's leaving early, whether it's blah, blah, blah. So having 3 academies will help streamline and probably support you a little bit better in your deployment of officers. Second of all, as we create a new district, whenever that happens, you're going to lose beats in one district because of the consolidation of geographical boundaries. So those officers potentially could move over in different districts based on bidding and seniority type of things. So, and then, yes, I'd like you to have more officers. I agree with that. But, you know, there's only so much money to go around. And if we can work that out, I mean, I'm all for that. And you've already proven the point that our calls of service, and we do a really good job decreasing the amount of crime in our community, which is important. I think the other thing is response times is critical wherever you live, and having the amount of officers in a beat and in a district is important to respond to those calls for service. So we'll analyze all that. I think having the analytics is important, the statistical information to help support you, and the decision to help give us the information we need to support you and make good informed decisions. So thank you, and I'll just end there.
Well, maybe let me piggyback on that just a little bit. The discussion this morning is deja vu of the last 2 or 3 years when from your presentation, and we've all come to the conclusion that we need more police officers. And so as a result of that, I think we all know what happened over the last year. We referred this to the voters, and they thankfully agreed with us, and they gave us a 1/4-cent sales tax to hire new public safety personnel. So that was a year ago, and now we're in the fortunate position of figuring out how we're going to use that resource appropriately. And as I was at the training facility last week talking about what is our capacity as far as our academies go, the answer to the question now is yes, we are going to be hiring as many and training as many police officers as possible, as many police officers as our capacity at our academy is going to allow for over the next few years. So that's water under the bridge. The question now is, and I know you're working on this, it sounds like you're adding an additional shift, adding an additional class to the academy, doing everything you can to increase the capacity so that we can hire in a professional and reasonable way as quickly as possible. So I think to some extent we're discussing the problem that we figured out how to solve a year ago. The new question, the new challenge we have is please tell us how we're going to train and staff as quickly as we can given the new resources that we have.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council and staff, I'll tell you that it's not just how we're hiring, but how we're going to deploy. In a few slides, Chief Cost is going to talk about the effectiveness of our police service officers and the thousands of calls that they take in place of a police officer. And it is strategies like that that go back to what kind of calls are we dispatching our officers on and how are we handling them, that is all part and parcel to excellent service at the same time that we are being as effective with the resources that we have on hand. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about our officer retention and wellness. The Patrol Officer Incentive is a new multi-step program that aims to recognize the importance of experienced patrol officers to the department and our community. Our patrol officers are at the tip of the spear when it comes to the greatest amount of risk. They operate in the ultimate dynamic and ever-changing environment where people and circumstances are unpredictable. The importance of building a cadre of experienced officers that can pass on the knowledge of their trade while being recognized and compensated for their tenure is important to the health and morale of the largest bureau at the Mesa Police Department. Lastly, the program will become a training ground for new sergeants. The highest level of compensation will be corporals, specially trained officers that will serve as a valuable resource to the sergeants and the officers in the field. Although the corporal program is designed as a pathway to promotion and, of course, succession planning, we do not expect all corporals to want to become sergeants. Regardless, this program will recognize and reward our officers. Our goal is to build an environment where our officers have fulfillment out of their career in patrol. Now, these officers that we're talking about, the Jim Francises of the world, the Mark Rees of the world, and the many others at Mesa PD, that regardless of this program, they are out there in our ranks today doing this kind of work. This program will recognize and reward their dedication to a career of service in patrol.
So I'm going to jump in on that because I'm going to speak a little bit to officer wellness. Retention and wellness, they really go hand in hand. The beauty of what we've done for many, many years at the Mesa Police Department is we've had an incredible kind of tip of the spear peer team. And we've really doubled down on that, and I'll get into that in just a second on how we've structured our peer team here recently to embed it in with our training division. But one of the things I want to highlight with you is within the last 2 weeks, we sent our new peer team supervisor, so this is the first time we've had a sworn police officer overseeing our peer team, to a symposium. It's a law enforcement symposium, and it was facilitated by the Police Executive Review Forum. We sent them out of state for an entire week to participate in this. This is an international symposium where we had members from around the globe, 300 experts on wellness and suicide for police officers, and 300 researchers sit there and talk about the issue of police wellness, specifically in regard to suicide. And the goal is simple, and the reason that we sent that this organization exists, the reason they had this, and the reason that we send our police officers is as law enforcement officers, everybody that you've known and met around the police department for years and years, we swore an oath to take care of others. That's what we do. That's why we do it. But a lot of times in doing that, we neglect to take care of ourselves. Our attendance here was to make sure that we stay tip of the spear and looking after our folks so we have our police officers for years and years to come. So I mentioned when I opened talking about our peer and wellness team. Recently in 2018, we actually took our wellness team from an isolated area of the department and embedded it with our training department. So now it's housed out of our training facility where every single one of our new hires flows through. And the reason we did that is to have exposure to the new people coming in. So on average, we hire 60 new people a year just for attrition. And sometimes that number fluctuates, so don't hold me to that forever. That's 60 new cops that are coming in that get the opportunity to see peer and wellness, to learn about all the programs that we have, and to understand that those members are there for the officers. And the goal is to, as they're transitioning through our police department, they always remember that, hey, peer and wellness is there, so when I'm having a difficult time, I can reach out to them and get the help that I need. To have the education of the resources that are out there. And so we all like numbers, right? I mean, the Mesa Police Department is completely data-driven. You heard Chief Koss talk about it for years and years. So last year, our peer and wellness team made 3,277 contacts with the members of our police department. That's a lot, considering you think that, or considering we have, just over 1,000, 1,200 or so employees. I mean, 3,200 contacts, that's a lot of contacts. So that team is very, very active in looking to take care of the members, the men and women that make up the Mesa Police Department. And it's right back to the goal. The goal is having a mentally, spiritually, and physically healthy police department. So as I transition from wellness, I just want to talk about one more thing, and that is, I know a lot of you know we've run a lot of really good programs out of our stations and out of our Family Advocacy Center. So back in 2015, the Red Mountain Station started a fitness program aimed to keeping our officers well. That fitness program was such a success that it has grown to several of the other stations. And it provides officers the opportunity to get a very quick, short, brief workout so they can stay in physical condition. One of the coolest stories is I happened to be out at the Red Mountain Station. One of our officers came in and he said, in 19 years since I got out of the police academy, I haven't worked out. Now I have the opportunity to work out. And he was coming into work early, walking into the gym, he was getting a quick workout in. So that's the impact that happens. It's happening all over the police department. To kind of take that to the next level, our Mesa Family Advocacy Center, they created a comprehensive program. They ran a pilot program out of the Family Advocacy Center. A couple of the people that are responsible for that, Acting Commander Chris Rash and Chief Sherry Burlingame, they facilitated that program. They set it up, they established it, they set up metrics to make sure it was successful. Incredible program, and it's a holistic approach that focuses on nutrition, mental health, and physical well-being. In that program, the detectives are encouraged, if they're participating in the program, to have at least a year visit with a counselor or a mental health professional, whether they think they need it or not. And most times, the feedback that they express to me is, I didn't think that I would appreciate that visit, but it was really, really good. So those are the things that we're doing on the topic of retention and wellness to make sure that we have a healthy, strong workforce.
Thank you. Excuse me, Mr. Heredia.
Chief Butler,
Yes, sir.
Can you talk through the evaluation of this program? Is there like a survey that is done with the folks that go through this program that highlights the either pre or post indicators that are they getting better or are they getting worse, or I was in a couple meetings nationally on this topic, and my concern was on seeing the indicators beforehand, and then how you treat those, and then how those things improve or not improve to better tackle those issues. And then also you alluded to some of the potential stigma of this type of service, especially in the police force. Maybe for folks going through this, can you talk a little bit on that end? And it goes into the kind of the evaluation piece, but I just wanted to ask on that end to see.
Sure. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Heredia. Surveys, absolutely. So the Family Advocacy Center program, the wellness program started with a survey, and as it was going through, they had follow-up surveys to measure effectiveness. So without a doubt, it was there. We measured the effectiveness of the program and really the resiliency that program built within the respective officers. And the last time that I saw that survey, and it's been a bit of time, the resiliency had increased. So the detectives reported that they felt like they were more resilient to deal with the crime types that they are exposed to in that area. On top of that, our wellness team, so taking it out of the Family Advocacy Center and taking it back to the unit of wellness that's incorporated with training, 3 months ago we pushed out a survey as well, and that was the start of developing a more comprehensive, centrally organized wellness program for the entire police department. So instead of having wellness programs operating out of respective divisions, we are working to create a large-scale wellness program where everything is funneled through our wellness team. So to answer your questions, yes. And you asked a question about stigma. That's really part and parcel to why we have our peer team embedded with training and having that exposure at the very entry level with our police officers as they're coming in, to let them know that, hey, it's okay to have issues. It's okay when you're experiencing troubling things to not like how it makes you react. And there are options out there. There are resources. There are members that have gone through it that are willing to help you navigate how to be well.
Is that just another question? Is that maybe the highlights of these surveys or the items that are coming up shared throughout the police department at the sergeant or lieutenant levels, commander levels, to better deploy strategies on conversations or?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council Member Heredia, so when we get the results of those surveys, for example, the Family Advocacy Center survey, I wasn't there for the first survey. The second survey, I was there, and we use that to measure effectiveness of the program and evaluate, is this program working? Is it doing the things that we want it to do with our membership, so we adapt? The results, as the results come in for the Training and Wellness Division survey, we're going to use that as a foundation of metrics to build the program, the overall mental and physical wellness program for the entire police department, based on what our membership is telling us that they're interested in.
Yes.
In regards to metrics, overall in the entire police department, what metrics do you use to track the wellness of officers?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Whitaker. So that's a great question. Everything that we do, we track. The best thing to track overall wellness would be a survey for them to respond. We have systems in place that track when officers become involved with critical incidents that we categorize as something that's a little more challenging for them to determine, hey, this individual officer has had a bunch of these contacts, and based on that, we do a response from our peer team. So our peer team would recognize that Officer A has had exposure within the last year to several challenging call types. We should just go do a proactive check to make sure that that officer is okay.
Yeah, if I may, yes. Councilmember Whitaker, when we did the survey in the Mesa Family Advocacy Center, that was started as a pilot program for how to do a more unit-specific program, which we are now starting to roll out into some other areas. But I think what you're asking for is specifically what was on those surveys. And we were asking people to rate how they feel about their time with their family, how they feel about their stress levels, how they feel about their workload, the support that they're getting from their leadership in their department. We asked them specifically about caseload, and then we also started tracking sick time, vacation time, discretionary time. And then at the end of, we did a 6-point check-in, and we saw a reduction in all of those areas. And right now, we're putting together the final stats to show the year of that, if that answers your question.
Not entirely, and it's to my own ignorance. And I just, everything that I try to look at is, what does the data look at from a more macro perspective, right? And I say, like, and I don't pretend to understand all the different intricacies of the police department, but from my perspective, if you look at something like suicides per officer, right? And if you see that number rising or if you see that number declining, obviously at an ultimate level, that would be an indicator that, you know, something is going wrong or something is getting better if that number is going up or down. But in my mind, that's the only, not to be insensitive, but that's a metric that's going to determine the mental health of any entity, right? So I guess like that would be one example. What other things can we use at a more macro level as a feedback loop to determine the mental health of a police department?
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman Whitaker, everything that we're doing is proactive in nature. We know that across the country, suicides are the leading cause of why we lose police officers in the country. And so because of that is the reasons why we started down the path of this one-year program to examine what we had and whether or not the program that we started was going to be successful. We're coming up on that year where we're going to be able to look back on 12 months worth of data to examine whether or not the things that we're putting in place are helping those detectives. And then once we have that information, then we begin to use that in order to work it throughout the rest of the organization. And to Councilman Heredia's question about whether or not our supervisors are getting that information, not yet, because we're still working through understanding what issues are affecting our officers and what programs we have in place in order to try and mitigate those issues that they're having. The proactive nature of us sending our peer sergeant to New York City to partake in a symposium with 300 other law enforcement leaders is a component of that, because we're looking not just at the systems we have built within the city of Mesa with the Mesa Fire Department, but what's occurring around the country in order to have us be more effective and be proactive at wellness for our officers. We understand wholly and completely that without a healthy workforce, we're not as effective as we could be.
Yeah, and I guess I appreciate the things that you guys are doing, but how do you measure the success of those things? From a metrics perspective, what data can you extract to say, yeah, that specifically was?
That's the data. That's what we're looking at. We're going to be examining the different focal points that Chief Burlingame spoke about in this one-year program that we're using specifically in the detective area. The detectives that we're talking about are dealing with violent crimes, child crimes, and so I think that we're going to get pretty good data about how they feel after going through the help of a nutritionist, and visiting with a counselor, and having physical activity, physical workouts. So far at the 6-month check-in, as she described, we're doing better. But to be able to tell you what exactly those metrics tell us at the moment, we don't have that yet.
Okay.
Okay, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, City staff, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to begin this slide, and it's titled Community Engagement. And community engagement has been part of our core values for this department since I've been employed here. And each year we get better and better, and we try to improve on what has happened over the years. And I'm going to start talking about customer service in regards of patrol operations. And our officers are amazing crime fighters. They're relentless, and those crime numbers that you see are a direct result of the men and women on the department and how they work. They're equally eager to engage with the community and to have contacts with the community that aren't on someone's worst day when they're calling 911. And to be able to have that opportunity, we need to reduce the amount of time that they're spending on calls for service. For example, right now they're spending about 46% of their time answering calls and about 29% time on proactive activity, which could include on-view criminal activity, but also include a community contact. And we have some programs in place that we've had and we continue to improve on to try to reduce that number moving forward, and that's part of our staffing plan. Just to give you an example, our online reporting system that citizens can get on and report everything from a lost property to criminal damage to a minor theft. We've had almost 3,000 reports put online that normally officers would have to take, and that saved our officers over 4,000 hours. So it's a significant impact on the reduction of time our officers have to spend on that. Chief Batista talked earlier about our PSO program. That's police service officers, and we also have a program called Civilian Investigative Specialists. Those are CISs. You know how we like our acronyms. So if you hear me say PSO or CIS, that's what I'm talking about. Our police service officer program answers on average 424 calls for service per month to free up our officers. Our civilian investigative specialists are at about 311 calls for service per month to free our officers up. We have 12 PSOs, or police service officers, and we have 9 civilian investigative specialists currently. And between those 2 units, that's about 8,000 calls per year. And although crime is going down, our calls for service are going up, so programs like this certainly help and is part of our ask. And the point I'm getting to as far as customer service goes is, what do we want our officers to do, and what do they want to do? And they certainly want to engage with the community. We need to give them the time to do so. Currently, you have a community action officer assigned to each patrol division throughout the city, and that's one. And where our push and our mission is that every single officer, all the beat officers throughout the city, are all community engagement officers. They're all community action officers. They all have that responsibilities. Our officers are leaders in our community, and we trust them. And we need to give them the tools and the opportunities to do that. To give an example of that, we had an officer just in Fiesta, and this is just one of many examples, who had an issue in a trailer park in Councilman Heredia's district. And that trailer park had issues with theft, issues with trespassing, some drug issues, and he took it upon himself to coordinate with the owner, coordinate with the manager. He himself found out how to call a community meeting together, to work with neighborhood services, to work with other departments within the city, and our crime prevention officer and our community action officer, and took ownership of that issue and had a very, very good turnout. And you know, prior to that, it's not common that we have our patrol beat officers taking that type of ownership. So I'm very proud of that, and we're looking to free up that time to give them even more time to enhance our communication with the public.
So Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, I'll piggyback on what Chief Cost had said there. You know, last year our Department of Crime Prevention officers facilitated over 400 formal events in our city. So that's our 4 district crime prevention officers in 400 events. Many of you I've seen at those events. I know that you're actively engaged in your communities, and you see our police officers out there. So these events, I mean, they're aimed at providing education of what the police department does to our community, but also giving the community the opportunity to see that our police officers are humans just like everyone else. And when that happens, we are able to build upon trust with those who we serve out in the community. So one of the other topics I want to talk about on that is the community engagement. And I know there's a pretty cool picture out there that highlights just all of the incredible things that we do. I mean, this is just a tidbit, you know, tip of the iceberg of everything that happens. But we recently revamped our community engagement to create a division. And in that division, community engagement, we brought in our recruiting team to be part of the community engagement. We brought in our volunteer team, which is an incredibly large volunteer team. And then we brought our youth development squad into the fold. And we took that division with that umbrella, and we're currently working to revitalize our 11 community forums that had sat idle for the last several years. And reestablish them, re-engage the community on those specific forums, and then take our youth development programs that we have run out of specific city and police department locations and push them out into the community. We want our officers that are working with youth to be in the places where the youth are, as opposed to the youth having to figure out transportation to get out to our public safety training facility. To do that, we've partnered with nonprofits like Save the Family, and we've also partnered with the Eagles Community Center, and we'll be running events out of the Eagles Community Center with our youth development squad. So one of our latest goals was to adapt our longtime successful Citizen Police Academy, and it has been incredibly successful for many, many years. But we wanted to make that more accessible to members of the community as well. So this Saturday, we have our first pilot class of our Community Engagement Academy. This class already has over 30 people confirmed to attend, and it's going to be held, the first one will be held at the Mesa Community College over off Dobson and Southern. What we hope to achieve is to develop a mutual understanding through education and dialogue with the members of the community that are attending the event. We want to demonstrate to our community that our officers are people too, but we also, going back to providing education, we want to provide them the context to what policing is, what our philosophical version of policing is at the Mesa Police Department, and then continue to build upon that trust.
Okay, as we talk about...
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Reddy has a question.
I'm sorry.
You know, community engagement is an important topic for me. 2 points. Is there a plan to identify through resources that you do have to increase the community action officers program? I know you mentioned taking it all department-wide, which is, I think, an important piece as far as engaging community in those pieces. But one question around community action programs, is there any thoughts to increasing that? And then also, can you talk through what is the internally for patrol and other officers, kind of the, I don't know if incentive is the right word, or how can they report on their activities if they stop at a community park and talk to kids playing at a basketball court, or engaging into neighborhood cookouts that are happening, those kinds of things internally, on how they can report that so that it becomes part of their work moving forward. Have you been tracking those pieces as well? And the thought of moving forward on that end, if that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Mayor, Councilman Heredia, to answer the first part of your question, as far as adding more community action officers, I think that is always part of our discussion for staffing considerations moving forward as we have these academy classes go through and we start reallocating resources and looking at what we're going to do, because they are highly effective and have been in part of those units in the past. I know what they can do. Our force multiplier, if you will, right now in the stead is all of those officers in those beats. And that program is being supported by giving them credit, if you will. Right now, our officers, they fill out a patrol log, and the log has everything from calls for service to backups to the amount of arrests that they have, tickets they're writing, both civil or criminal. And we're implementing new data, new CAD system that will recognize officers and give them clear, defined terms on what a community engagement contact is. So when they do drive by a park in between calls in their proactive time and they see a group of kids, they can get out and interact with them and show that human side. And even if it's 20 or 30 minutes, they'll now be able to put that on their log, and we'll be able to track it better than we ever have before, and it'll also be part of their performance evaluation metrics that we look at every single year. So it'll be part of exactly what we're expecting from our officers in a formal way as well, to give that recognition and encouragement.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman Heredia, I just wanted to piggyback on that. Everything that we're doing with respect to technology, figuring out a better way to handle 911 calls, the use of non-sworn in patrol, is all focused on providing more patrol availability from east to west. And that is exactly what Chief Koss is talking about. Those officers' ability to not only detect ongoing crime, but to drive by something, recognize it as an opportunity, and then in turn, it be recognized in their annual evaluation so that it's meaningful, it's worth something. And so that's the end goal. That's what we're working towards. Yes, sir.
Well, before we moved on, I just wanted to maybe put a point on the Citizens Police Academy that you mentioned earlier. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is for the last several years, we've done 2 classes of Citizens Police Academy. They've been primarily folks that come into it as kind of boosters of the police department. They're drawn to the program because their spouses or for whatever reason they're fans of the Mesa Police Department, and they want to, and it's a great program, and they end up being in an alumni association that offers a lot of great service to the community. So that's a great program, and it's not broken. We don't want to fix it, but I like the twist that it'd be nice for us to spend just a moment saying we're doing that slightly differently now, because at least once a year you're going to have an academy class that you go out and proactively recruit, and these are folks in the community that we want to engage in public safety, that perhaps haven't been, they're not the spouses and the fans. They're the folks that we need to be interacting with to have some impact in the community. And that's the class that you're starting this next week. Is that correct?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council and staff, absolutely. That is the focus of that is that we thought, hey, here's the opportunity to take the Citizens Police Academy into the neighborhoods where the people are. The actual Citizens Police Academy is lengthy. It takes weeks and weeks to complete, and it's one night every Wednesday for 8 weeks, I believe. And our academy is way out in Northeast Mesa. So this concept of taking the programs of the department and educating the people in the community where they live was the brainchild of Chief Rankin and his staff, and we have followed through. So we're excited about this Saturday because it's the first time that we've done it this way.
Great idea. Mr. Whitaker.
One question before we move on. Does the police department do any kind of public polling? And I ask that because ultimately all these things lead up to the community having a better opinion of the police department, right? So ultimately I would say that would be the metric to determining success. How does the community feel about the police department? So do you do any kind of polling annually or anything that determines how people feel about the police department?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Whitaker, we do. In fact, in 2015, we did or 2016, we did a survey, surveying our community to get a gauge and metrics of the things that are important to them in regard to the Mesa Police Department. And in fact, we are in conversations for an additional survey with a organization, a nationally known organization. They've sent over examples of their survey. In fact, this last week, we had conversations as to the content of the survey, what we liked about it, what we didn't, different segments of the survey that are optional, and even discussions on how we would intend if we decide to go forward with this survey. And I believe the desire is there amongst the chief's executive team to go forward with this survey, but how we intend to get it into the hands of the individuals of our community that want to have their voice heard in a more formal setting.
Yeah, I guess ultimately the things we're discussing go back to the people that live in Mesa, right? So that's something that I would love to see moving forward, or any historical analysis. And it doesn't need to be anything crazy, hiring a polling company to call people and say, how do you feel about the Mesa Police Department? Press 1 for, or 0 for bad and 10 for good, right? And on a scale, and you could start to, if you have no metrics to determining your success, then it'll help guide in what direction you should move, in my opinion. So.
Agree.
Okay, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. I wanted to talk about homelessness briefly, and the issues and the concerns that we have within the community, and then how we're tackling this issue. We talked earlier about our calls for service going up. You see crimes going down. Categories, and Chief Burlingame will touch on our mental health categories in just a minute, but categories that are directly related to homelessness or the issues of homelessness within our communities, such as trespassing or transports, have gone up. Trespassing, for example, 18%, which is about 1,000 more calls than this time last year. So that is something that our officers deal with on a daily basis, and it takes up hours of their time to deal with. So what are we doing to help deal with these issues? And the partnership that we have with our city departments, and I wanted to recognize Deputy City Manager Natalie Lewis and Detective Aaron Rain, who's in the back, and hoping I don't call him up here, for their efforts and incredible success that they're doing, working with all the city departments to tackle this issue. And as far as our patrol officers go and what we do within patrol, and Aaron Rain had a big part of this, but Sergeant Deuce and Brandon Lavin in Central started a program called Operation Mainline. And what that is, that has been run in every single one of your districts. We're basically hit every division, and it is an effort to contact the homeless folks that are on the street and to link them with wraparound care. And we work with agencies such as Community Bridges, United Way, Adelante Health, Save the Family, and several others to basically the end goal of programs like this is sustained housing. That is our goal. There is an enforcement component, but it is an outreach component primarily as far as that operation goes. And to date, since July of last year, as we started running these programs, there's been 61 people permanently housed after hundreds and hundreds of contacts on these operations. And that's amazing. And they're housed throughout the valley. Majority of them are housed in Phoenix, but they're housed nonetheless and getting on their feet. And it's been a fantastic success as far as that goes. And it also takes that burden as we talk about staffing off of our patrol officers. Another partnership that we have that I believe that you're well aware of that we just want to publicly thank is our partnership with the Prosecutor's Office and City Court on our community court program. And again, Detective Aaron Rain has a huge part of that as well, along with so many city entities. And the numbers are staggering. Since July of 2018, there's been 575 citations into city court. So these are proactive officers or responsive calls where officers are citing folks that are, whether they're suffering from homelessness or other issues or challenges, and they're going straight into our city court. And there's been 65 graduates of that program that program seeks out opportunities to get services to these folks to stop the cycle. And what does that cycle look like? Well, those 65 graduates were responsible for 3,400 police contacts over the period of time that they've been in the city of Mesa. Out of those 3,400 police contacts, they resulted in 1,300 arrests. So again, those 65 graduates, 1,300 arrests, 3,400 police contacts. Those same 65 graduates now have only accounted for 3 arrests moving forward. So amazing success and partnership, again, with the prosecutor, city court, and the folks, our officers buying into the program to understand that we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem, that we need to figure out how to get folks the services they need and then reduce calls from that point.
Thank you, Mr. Heredia.
And I don't know if it's a question for you, Chief Costa or Chris or John, is there a way that we can identify us deploying these resources for community court and other services, the cost savings that the city has identified through this work, because those are impressive numbers, going from hundreds of arrests to 3. That is a success in itself. But as far as the resources internally as a city, we deploy these resources to have that type of success. And so is there a way to identify, some of the potential cost savings just to think about?
Let us look at that. And one way to translate those numbers, I guess, would be kind of, we could think about manpower ways, it's like to that difference as far as the number of arrests or calls, we could figure out kind of like on average how many times an officer through a week or a year does, what that represents as far as manpower. Maybe we could translate it that way. That would be, I think, one approach. So let us go back and kind of take these numbers and maybe translate that into an officer's time or effort, and we can just it'll be averages, but we could do that. And because these numbers are really impressive, but then if you think, well, that means there's 1 or 2 more officers times available, they're not having to spend with these individuals on the streets. That could be meaningful, but we can work on that.
Okay. And I think it helps us as we fund in our CDBG and the programs there. We're funding community bridges and those folks there. if we need to add resources there,
Sure.
or just to evaluate those.
Kind of helps
programs,
translate that,
right?
yeah.
So-
We can, let us work on that,
Okay,
that's good,
thank
yeah.
you.
I had a conversation with Judge Tafoya on exactly that, I think just a week ago, where he was saying that the ripple effect of this new program is not just in the police department, but it's in the courts and it's in the jails. And Judge Tafoya was talking about just a few specific individuals that over the last few years, the community has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on for incarcerating and other services. And as a result of this proactive program, those, the savings are very, very significant. And he was lobbying me, saying, hey, when we can use a few more navigators, we can, here and there. The success that this program is experiencing needs to be encouraged and added upon. And so we might need to spend some resources.
No, that's good. Well, and it helps us identify what are the navigators and others that they're making this effective for us. And I think we all would agree, and we're trying to find ways to bring those resources. So yeah, no, that's great, because that would help when we go through budgets, especially CDBG and things like that, we can translate that into how that helps the police department. So we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, and staff, mental illness continues to be a significant impact on our patrol workload. Overall, mental health-related calls in the last year have increased by 42%. Within that, suicide and mental health detainer calls have increased 12%. Our crisis response team continues to be a critical component of this patrol response. They have absorbed an increasing amount of the workload by serving mental health detainers and writing emergent petitions for those who are a danger to themselves or a danger to others. In addition, the team conducts follow-up to prevent or mitigate the call for service initially. To further enhance service levels, we're partnering with a mental health practitioner who's going to provide us with an actual practitioner to ride with our crisis response team. That person's going to be responsible for assisting us in follow-up and to ensure that people are connected with the services that they need. We anticipate adding a second provider within the year, and our focus on this whole program is going to be to keep those suffering from mental illness out of the criminal justice system and in the mental health system, where they can get the resources and services that they really need. In addition, we have rolled out our resident assistance program this year. This is a program that allows citizens to voluntarily provide information to the police department about disabilities, mental health, or medical concerns which may impact the police response to a call. The program allows officers to obtain key information about the location that they're going to or the individual that they're going out on prior to arriving on scene, which better prepares that officer for handling that call. Creates a much safer environment for both the citizen and the officer if the officer understands what kind of situation they're coming into. One of our other initiatives that we've had for the past 3 years now to engage our community is our Mental Health Awareness Fair. This is open to everyone in the community, and it gives them an opportunity to speak to experts and to learn about what resources are available out there to assist both them and their family members. Typically, we have about 35 resource providers that participate in the fair, and in our last two, we've had roughly 250 attendees that show up. The feedback from the community has been overwhelmingly positive, particularly because it creates very ease of access to get the information and the resources, which can sometimes be a very challenging and cumbering process for people. Another successful method we use to engage our community is our Mental Health Advisory Board. This is a partnership with mental health providers, businesses, nonprofits, the VA, the prosecutor, Mesa Fire and Medical, just to name a few. It was formed to collaboratively address the issues affecting the mental health community and the police department. The board provides input and recommendations on how to resolve issues with us, and they also provide recommendations to us on our training, policy, and the programs that we have in the department with our mental health initiative. It's probably one of our more active and more engaged boards that we do have in the police department right now. Before we move on to our next slide, I want to address one other community engagement program that we have, and that's our Aspire Academy. This is a collaboration between the Mesa Police Department and the Mesa Fire Department. Chief Kameli is my partner in crime in this. Katie Pfeiffer from Fire and Lieutenant Kim Scott from the Police Department have been absolutely instrumental in getting this program up and running and sustaining it. We just completed our 4th academy. This is academy designed for high school-aged girls, and it's designed to introduce them to non-traditional career fields, police and fire. But more importantly, it's teaching them about courage, character, and confidence. And we found that really we're instilling some life skills in these young women that they're able to take on and apply no matter what it is that they do in their future. We've had some really significant success stories in the past. The one that stands out most to me is a young woman that came into the academy. She'd been very close to her brother who'd been deployed in the military, and she was really feeling kind of desperate, left out. She was experiencing some bullying in school, very depressed, very low self-esteem. She came and spent 3.5 days at the academy and started bonding with the other girls and the cadre of female instructors from across the valley that we bring out there. And the feedback that we got on the survey afterwards was that it was really life-altering for her. She was on the verge of doing who knows what, and she realized that there's a lot of people out there that do care about her, that there's a bright future for her, and that she is a really good person. So I think that that really lets you know how important that this program is and how instrumental it is in some people's lives. So we're very proud of that program. We're very excited, and we'll be moving on to year 5 next spring.
There's some great things going on. We're going to finish off with our technology. Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, and staff, our smartphones are an important highlight in this modern day tool will be a tremendous asset to our officers. The phones will provide our officers with the safety of using work phones for work instead of using their personal phones. Moreover, these new phones will be tied to their car computers, allowing them to see their call information at a glance. Our IT technicians will leverage the ability of the phones to use a person's fingerprint in order to help our officers establish someone's identity. The phones will give the officers the capability of taking their own evidence pictures versus waiting for a mobile camera, and they'll be able to tape record their own interviews if necessary. And this is just a handful of the applications we're going to be able to leverage with these new phones. Our information technology analysts will be charged with the work of taking our lines of crime data and visualizing it, making it readable, and at a glance, we'll be able to tell what's up, what's down, and simultaneously using mapping tools to tell us more about what's happening and where. And this is exciting.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology. And the reason that we use this technology is to make, it's like civilianization. It's to free up time to make our lives easier. I mean, that's why we all carry these little phones around, right, to make our lives a little bit easier. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, but... I
think it complicates it.
Imagine if you didn't have it, though. So, so RMS is just that. So our RMS is a report management system. It's something that we're rolling out this fall. It's a update to our old system. Our old system required a ridiculous amount of time and energy to maintain, to keep it functioning well for our police officers. This new system is a cloud-based system. It has the ability to be updated annually through a software update, and it will require a lot less work on the back end to keep it going. As Chief Batista said, it really connects well with our smartphone program that they're rolling out, to where our officers have instant connectivity from their computer onto their smartphone. So it's a really cool system. And the second aspect is that I want to highlight is SnapComms. SnapComms will give us the ability to help our officers stay safe out on the streets. So you know that we'll have phones. Each of our officers will have an assigned phone, and they'll have the computer in the car. We can push out important messages to either the in-car computer or to the officer's phone that reminds them to wear their seatbelts, watch their speed, don't look at their smartphone while they're driving, little things like that in keeping with the smartphone topic. But really the beauty of it is it's proven through other agencies to reduce collisions for our police officers out there on the streets. So that's really what it's about, is the safety aspect.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. We will roll out some new technology in holding as well to improve the safety and security of our inmates. We want to purchase a Guard One scanner. It's an automated system that we'll use to conduct security and welfare checks within the holding facility. It will replace our current method of manually completing and documenting welfare checks on inmates. The system will provide transparency and ensure accountability as well as the safety and security of the inmates and reduce our liability. The other piece of software that we want to roll out is a legal case tracking system, which will allow us to log, track, and assess records requests, notice of claims, litigation, and subpoenas. It'll allow us to improve our efficiency and process requests in a more timely manner.
Question.
Excuse me, Mr. Whitaker.
I'm confused. What's a holding facility scanner? I didn't quite understand that.
The name of the scanner is a Guard1 scanner. It's actually a handheld device that we'll use in our holding facility. So when our detention officers have to go do 15 or 30-minute welfare checks on the inmates, they can take this scanner with them. They wave it across the door, and it will document that who did the check and when they did that check, so that we can ensure that we have complied with all of our requirements in ensuring the safety of those inmates.
Gotcha. I was under the impression that we started sending all of our inmates to, I thought we outsourced that.
Every time we make an arrest and we book a prisoner, they come into our holding facility initially. It's just a 24-hour holding facility. From there, they will either go to MCSO if they are being charged with a felony, or out to Core Civic if it's a misdemeanor crime.
So this is for the short time holding
Correct.
period that occurs before that? Okay, thank you.
We are applying the Smart Cities initiative to leverage technology to improve service levels as well as both community and officer safety. One of the most important ways I think that we're doing that moving forward is our real-time crime center. This is a new concept to provide better service and real-time support to our patrol officers responding to calls. The real-time crime center will be the central point of contact for monitoring calls for service and for relaying important information during critical events. This center will enhance patrol operations by ensuring proper resources and essential intelligence are provided to our officers. The crime center will monitor the call loads citywide to determine if our resources need to be redeployed, and it will enhance communication technology in real time and greatly improve officer and community safety. We are continually seeking creativity in our approach to policing by looking for ways to be more efficient while improving our systems and services. In that light, we are looking at ways to improve our investigative processes. We are piloting a test now for unmanned aerial systems or drones to decrease man hours and improve our work product in serious and fatal collisions as well as on our homicide investigations. Eventually, these UASs will be incorporated into other aspects of police work where we can reduce manpower needs and increase officer safety. Another example.
Chief, Mr. Thompson.
Chief, on the AS or UAS, are we going, are patrol officers going to have those in those instances where they may be chasing a perpetrator and they can deploy those to look over fences or to do something of that nature to make sure that they're safe before proceeding?
I think that's in the future. Right now, we're just piloting it within traffic and homicide to make sure that we have the proper equipment and understand the rules of engagement. We have a policy regarding this. We'll do a community rollout as we look at other areas in the department, special operations patrol, for how we're going to use these and incorporate them into our day-to-day operations.
I have one question
Yes.
while we're paused. Talking about using our smartphones as far as neighbors and members of our community, we often are aware of suspicious activities or things going on or people in our neighborhoods or wherever we are. And it's not enough to really call the police department or whatever. It's just like a little bit of suspicion. I know we have a couple of ways through the ring.com, the Neighbors app, you know, to snap a photo, to put out some information. I know we have an old app. I don't know if it's really something that's really used, the police department. What's the most effective way for our community to report the tips? And when you have multiples or it crosses over to another neighborhood, it's a way to really
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman Duff, we also have Nextdoor, which has over 60,000 community members in specific neighborhoods that we are constantly monitoring for that kind of information. There's other software out there that we've begun to look at. One of it's called 411 Tip, and it is essentially a tip line through text messaging that we are looking at, but it's at this point in the very early stages, because through the information that we get from Nextdoor, which has been very reliable, and now Ring, we do have the ability to connect and hear what's going on. The other component that didn't get touched on with the cell phones is going to be that our officers are going to be carrying business cards. Their business cards, we're going to have their cell phones on it. Now, obviously the caveat is the officers aren't going to be able to answer their phone 24/7. But that connectivity that we want to establish with what Chief Cost was talking about, in that our patrol officers are now going to be really a full service unit within those respective beats, that they will be establishing those kinds of connections in those neighborhoods. They take a call, they leave their business card. The idea is that once we let a day or two go by, our officers are going to call back and just say, hey, is everything okay? Did I get all the information off that last call? All the information from that burglary? Is there anything else that was missing? And it's just essentially a follow-up to say, how are you doing? I cared enough to call you back. And it's an establishment of those relationships, the ability of our officers to communicate with the neighborhoods, with the community through the cell phone is a part of what we want to establish.
I understood on Nextdoor that was an element that you could share your communications with the neighborhoods, but I didn't really understand it as a way that you used as a tool to identify crimes. Is that correct?
So they'll report it to us, but we can't engage in the conversations that are going on between the neighbors.
Okay, and Nextdoor is kind of convoluted because it has a lot of other elements on it all over the place. So I was looking at a way that was directly, associated with crime in my neighborhood or where I am or what I'm observing, in a way to just collectively, with our phones and our eyes, we're like your mini patrols in wherever we are, and just collecting that information and making it useful, so that when you're had several reports of similar things, or the same person being identified with a similar in another neighborhood, or I don't know, it'd be a way to really narrow it down quickly.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman Duff, earlier you mentioned that we had an application on our phones and that it seemed like it was a little antiquated, and it is. And so this is all part of the revamp that we're looking to re-examine how we do, because that is another component that we're going to be able to push out, is to say, hey, talk to us through this application. If you don't want to call us, you can send us the information this way. The issue with that application is that it hasn't been used.
Ideally, I love what's happening with the Mesa Now application, where it has from community, our leadership within our city, our utility bills, to what's going on in current events and parks and everything. If we had one more tab in there about maybe for public safety, of some way that's very simple and in one place with all the other things, and really use that, so we don't have to have multiple ways of how do I communicate this to the city? I would love to see something like that if we're, kind of still in that search. Thank you.
Jeremy.
Question on that topic. I believe when I was reading through the agenda that you're purchasing some form of software that goes, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but goes through Facebook and extrapolates data that's relevant to the police department. Did I read something like that or a piece of software that you're looking to purchase?
I think you're referring to an information software that we're looking at for the Fusion Center, and that also has a social media analysis type of program where it can skim and kind of get a feel for what kind of things are going on across the sites.
Okay. I guess to the previous point, we talk about how do you collect the data, right? And you talk about Nextdoor, and I am actually curious what your process is of extracting data from Nextdoor, and is there a piece of software that you could apply to Nextdoor or Facebook or other applications that will extract specific keywords or other data that would almost create an automated tip line, if you will, right? You see all the time that people go next door and they'll post a picture, this is for my Ring doorbell, this guy stole a package from me, right? And I would wonder, is there a package or anything that you can look at from a software perspective to create some type of artificial intelligence to go through and analyze those databases, essentially extract that data for keywords like stolen, right? And then it automatically gets sent to an analysis. officer or something to determine, you know, if they need to look at something like that?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, Councilman Whitaker, we can certainly look at that. Right now, what happens is the report is generated through Nextdoor, and at each district, one of the crime prevention officers monitors that information and then rolls it forward to the community action team officer or the detective unit that's in that area where the event is occurring. But to say that it's automated at this point, it's not.
So that I understand you correctly, then I know there's a bunch of other stuff to Duff's point in Nextdoor, right? It takes a long time to go through all that data. Is the officer responsible for that is actually going through all of that data to look for things relevant to policing?
No, actually, there are specific messages that are sent to the crime prevention officers in those respective areas, and that's how they're keyed on it. No.
So there's like an option in Nextdoor where someone can select a button or something that says this is a community safety policing type of issue. Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
The last process that I want to talk about where we've looked for improvement is in our hiring unit. We've revamped those hiring processes, which has resulted in a decrease from 200 days to 54 days to process a police applicant or police recruit. The other thing that we're doing is we're reevaluating our process for hiring professional staff to be better aligned with business practices. These are just a few examples of how we are implementing smart cities initiatives in the police department.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city staff. What you have before you now is the police department summary. To put it into context, we have separated out other funds from the general governmental funds, from which the police department is 95% funded. So backed out any other funds, and I want to focus more in on our general governmental funds. For the current fiscal year, within the general fund, we are looking to be over budget by approximately $1.5 million. Several items are contributing to this overage. We anticipate $1 million overrun within our fleet expenses. This is partially due to the rising fuel costs we're seeing, as well as our continuance of the vehicle refurbishment program. Our two-way radio costs are also running over budget by about 10%, and we're forecasting a $1.3 million net overage in personal services, and this is primarily coming from our overtime. However, favorably offsetting these overages is that we are expecting a $1 million savings in our inmate housing expense for this current fiscal year.
I'm sorry, can you explain that? You're coming in $1 million less than you anticipated in jail costs. Is that what I think I just heard you say?
Correct. From budget, we will be approximately $1 million under budget on our holding facility.
So the savings
expense
was greater than we expected. We were pretty conservative in our estimates when we initiated the contract, but since then it's worked out very well for us and seen significant savings. So that's helped us a lot.
Right, so we'd already built in some anticipated savings.
Right, we made a estimate in the budget, and it was better than we thought, I guess. Is there specific items that drove that? It was the numbers, or?
Correct. So there's two things we look at. One is to budget, and then one, we always compare our savings to the county sheriffs. And so to budget, we are coming in about $1 million under budget. What we would have saved had we sent our inmates to MCSO is about $1.8 million.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question?
Year to date?
No, that's projected for the fiscal year. Last fiscal year, we had approximately $1.8 million, and it looks like we're going to hit $1.8 million again for the current fiscal year for our savings by sending our inmates to Core Civic.
What was the total cost for that?
The total cost that we have for our housing, which includes both Core Civic as well as MCSO, is we're looking at about $3.1 million.
Is there a breakdown of MCSO and Core Civic?
Yes. For Core Civic, we're looking at $2.8 million, about $2.9 million. And for MCSO, about 173,000 for the fiscal year. That's what we're projecting.
So largely it's the core civic contract.
Correct.
So because we still, obviously, we still have some utilization of MCSO, that we've determined there are some incidences where it makes sense to go ahead and send to MCSO. It's not every case that goes to core civic. And we also, I need to also suggest that's the contract amount. What we're not counting in here, which is a significant savings, is the time and labor that we had from individuals from the Mesa Police Department who had to be responsible for transporting back and forth. And that took up a tremendous amount of time just on that group. And then the other significant savings is officers who used to have to go down to Phoenix and sit and wait until the individual was processed before they could leave. So there's not only actual dollar savings, there's a tremendous amount of, probably not, I don't know if it's dollar for dollar, but there's a significant amount of staff efficiencies that we've gained, especially in our sworn officers position, because they're back on the street much faster than they had been before.
So a couple, so overall, are arrests up or down over last year? I mean, as far as holding people to send them on?
Actually, they're actually down a little bit. What we're showing for the average number of inmates that are housed per day, we've gone from an average per month of 105 down to 99.
Okay, so there is a decline in that. And do we have any, I'm sorry, I'm not up to date on the contract, but is there contract minimums that we have to make annually, monthly, anything like that?
No, not at all.
With CORE?
No. Our rate structure is based upon the number of inmates, but we're at the highest rate, I guess, because our inmate number is so low.
There's no incentive for us
Absolutely
to
not.
arrest more people to take to core civic. It's just, it is what it is. It just was a per cap. They had our history, and we shared that with them, kind of what historical numbers are. And I don't know if historical numbers fluctuate big percentages, not more than 3 or 4 or 5% a year, right? Am I right? So it's not like a big, if it changes up or down, it's a trend, not a big event kind of concept.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to insinuate that there was an incentive, for more, but I didn't understand how the contract was, if it was per inmate or there was a minimum, they gave us, you are within this range and therefore, this is how much you're charging per month or annually.
Correct.
Just the breakdown of that.
Councilmember Duff, yes. So we do pay a fixed transportation fee each month of $35,000, regardless of how many inmates go. That's for a set number of transports. However, for the inmate cost, we pay a daily housing rate of $67.96. The difference from MCSO is that there's an additional booking fee at MCSO that we're not incurring at Core Civic. And then if our inmates are processed and released within the same day, we will only pay a half-day amount for that day, but those are pretty minimal.
So we have the base of the transportation fee, and then it is a per day, per inmate.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think that's it. Chief, is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council staff, I'm exceedingly proud of our police department, and when I say department, I don't mean the brick and mortar building. I mean the men and women that make up our great department. They serve our city with pride and excellence in everything they do. And without them, the cars don't run and the calls don't get answered. We are undoubtedly second to none in policing effectiveness. And I've been saying it since I arrived. It is our people and our community, and we are one of the best police departments in the country. And it is you and our city staff that are responsible for that. So you should be proud. Our city's safety is our #1 priority, and it always will be. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Thompson?
Chief, thank you for the presentation. I'm glad we're doing a lot more community engagement. I think our citizens can help us fight the crime and so forth. I'm glad that we're really taking the physical and mental health of our officers, of all of our public safety, so I commend fire as well on what they're doing to take that kind of seriously now. I still feel like we're the little Dutch boy, you know, plugging the dam. Especially when you start looking at your priority E response times and your response times, priority 1 response times that you have towards the end of the presentation. You know, I look at this, and as a citizen of Mesa of District 6, and if I were a citizen of District 5, I would have concerns because I'm looking at the response times are in most instances, well, in all instances, they're a minute more than any other area in the city, you know, which is telling me that as a citizen, my 911 call isn't as a priority as it is in other parts of the city. If we're staffing appropriately, it should be a 3-minute response time across the board or 4-minute, whatever that would be. You know, so I take exception to that a little bit as a citizen of the city of Mesa. I know we're doing the best we can with what we have. But truly, you know, as we start going into the budget season, I'd really like a true number of what it's going to take to reduce your response times, to not just plug the gaps, but to repair the dam. And that's what I'm looking for. I'd love to have an honest discussion about what it's going to take for you to be effective and efficient in all that you do. Thank you.
Other comments? You know, I think the headline from this presentation, I hope it doesn't get lost, but it's what we led with, which is that we are at a, correct me if I'm wrong, an all-time low with regard to the crime rate. I mean, I knew that we have previously talked about we're at a 10-year low, but this shift from, or down to 24.3 crimes per thousand, is that the new 2018 number? And we've been previously talking about 2017. Is that the change?
Correct. That's correct, yes.
Okay. So that's a big deal. So I hope, so congratulations and thank you. I hope you'll express to your troops, we can't ask you to do a whole lot better than the best you've ever done. So thank you very much. That's very impressive. A couple of things that I think it's important for my takeaways from your presentation. We all made a commitment to the voters of our community last November that if they would trust us with some additional resources, that we would spend those on additional public safety personnel to address some of the areas that we still need to improve on, the response times and getting people where they need to be. And so I'm pleased to see that as part of this presentation, we are adding 17 additional positions above and beyond traditional attrition that we're committed to. And we had the numbers that we'd talked to the voters about were in the neighborhood of 65 police officers, 45 firefighters. We're on track to do that. 17 this year. If we do that over the course of 4 years, that's 68. That's more than we'd promised. So I think that the only limitations, as we talked about earlier, is our capacity to train these officers and the fact that you probably don't want to add all additional 65 or more police officers in 1 year. That's going to create a problem 20 years from now. I wanted everyone to understand that we are delivering on the promise that we made to the voters in the very first year, an additional 17 officers on top of the regular classes that we always do. I want to also just echo my appreciation for the focus on both in the police department and the fire department, officer wellness. I think that was one of the things that concerned us most over the last year or two as we heard about the strain that was being experienced with overtime and how busy we were, particularly in certain parts of the city. So kudos to you for the additional work that you're doing there. Also, again, just thank you for the focus on mental health, not just of police officers, but in our community. We've had discussions outside of the police department, but in our school districts and others, of the tremendous need that we have to respond to mental health crises in our community. We have a spike in teenage suicides. We have an uptick in suicide calls generally. So I think I appreciate the fact that you're aware of that and that you're being strategic in the way you're providing the services aimed at the crises that we're having in our community regarding mental health. I also appreciate the focus on civilianization. I think it's a false idea to focus on the number of total sworn officers as opposed to patrol officers. And it certainly is not necessary for someone to go to the academy and to incur PSPRS liabilities to serve in areas like analysts and planners and auditors and pilots and specialized technology positions, which are a big part of modern day policing. So I hope that we'll focus on what are the correct numbers to be concerned about. The total number of sworn officers is not it. It's how many folks do we need in patrol, and are those the correct numbers in that? So I understand that, and I know you do, and I appreciate that. So again, my hope is that the takeaway here is this is the best we've ever done. So congratulations and thank you.
And I just want to, I'm sorry, I should have spoke
Yes.
up earlier before you did your summary, but I just want to commend you on the work that you do, especially I know with the stresses of not having the resources that you need, and yet we are one of the safest large cities in the nation and very innovative in the way and approach. And I think that is one of the reasons that we is our new approaches that we look at and do despite the shortages of manpower. I do hope that the sales tax increase that we're implementing will sufficiently address the manpower needs that you have, so that we're not overstressing our officers and the overtime demand is done. And I hope that that is achieving that. I know there's presentations prior to putting that on the ballot, and I'm trusting that we can get there. Also, I just wanted to bring up in the police response time, there is part of me that says, yes, it can be manpower, but there are geographic challenges. And I realize that we do need the station down in District 6, and then that will certainly help to have the officers located closer, and as far as where their hub is, and not have but that I know that's going to take several years, and working on that and being innovative. And I like that we're moving ahead with the technology and efficiency and being innovative in order to deal with that, as well as our police department as a whole. I commend you for that. And a special shout out to Sherry and leading, and the others, and Mary and all the others on the Aspire Academy. It warms my heart every time I hear about it. I know you're doing a world of good, and those young women will become mothers and leading our next generation. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Mr. Thompson.
If I can, just do a plug for Aspire. You're reminding me of that, Councilmember Duff. A plug out for you guys for doing Aspire. It's a phenomenal program for the young women in our city. If there's any vendors out there that want to contribute, I know that you would surely take their dollar. Every dollar is put to good use for the young women that you and your group are helping. So thank you. And vendors, please feel free to step up and donate.
Amen. It was fun to see all the, I had the privilege of speaking at the graduation ceremony of Aspire, and I asked a lot of the young ladies that were there, well, I asked actually the Sherry Burlingames and the Mary, the folks who are in positions now of leadership. I said, did anybody give you any encouragement at all as a young woman to pursue a career in public safety? And we know the answer to that was no. So it's fun to see the shift in culture and how young women are being encouraged to enter the profession now. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. We appreciate it. The next item on our agenda is item 2B. That's appointments to the 2020 Census Task Force. Is there a motion to that effect? Thank you. And a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 3 is acknowledge receipt of various boards and minutes. Is there a motion to that effect as well? Thank you, Mr. Thompson and Mr. Freeman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is a report on meetings and conferences attended. Anything you'd like to share with us, Council?
I know we have a long meeting, but I'll run through our volunteer appreciation events that we've been attending. I know personally I attended a few, as well as I know our other members did, in the Salvation Army, our fire volunteers and library volunteers. Some of us also were at the Pride Parade. Thank you, Mayor Heredia, and many of the others that were here in our police department for being there and standing behind our one community pledge that we have here in Mesa. I'll just leave it at that. I know that maybe the interfaith breakfast, I think, was very moving. And addressing our teenage suicide and what we can do to prevent it well before the conversation even gets close to crisis.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a busy time of year because we are thanking all of the volunteers in our community. So thank you, Council, for being a big part of that, and appreciate the reminder about the interfaith breakfast. And I alluded to earlier the focus we're at a community level. We're putting on mental health, not just in a police context, but also in school districts and other contexts as well. So certainly a very important topic. Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Yes, just a note, we had our West Mesa Business Alliance meeting yesterday, and Councilmember Heredia and Duff and the mayor and I were there, and supporting West Mesa and hope it grows, and just encouraging the economic development there. So, and then along with all the other things that we went to during the week, been quite a few. So many, I need to write them down.
Sure. Thanks. Anything else? The next item on our agenda is schedule of future meetings. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder, we do have a study session council meeting on Monday, April 15th. Get your taxes done before you come. And that evening we'll also have a budget presentation from Development Services. So I believe we'll start at 5 o'clock. This Friday, Councilman Heredia is having a district update at Goody's Family Restaurant from 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. And that's located at 1862 West Baseline Road. So invite our residents in that area to come and meet with Councilman Heredia. And then also this weekend on Saturday, April 13th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we'll have Celebrate Mesa at Pioneer Park. It's a free event, so I encourage everybody to come on out.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.